and welcome to the Cloud Counsel. The Cloud Counsel brings together the foremost business and technology leaders to seek their advice on navigating the major challenges, both immediate and in the longer term. As always, the Cloud Counsel airs live every other Tuesday on CXO Focus. You can email us anytime at cxofocus@nutanix.com with topics you'd like to see discussed, and we'll look to address those in future episodes with relevant experts. My guest today will be advising us on security, policy concerns, distributed workforce during what truly have been unprecedented times. And when do companies need leadership the most? The answer is in times of uncertainty and disruption. But that is also when it's the most difficult time to lead. And on today's Cloud Counsel, we are privileged, truly privileged, to hear from a great leader who has effectively navigated and truly led their organization during times of intense uncertainty and change. And our guest is here to share his experience and insights. And to do that, please welcome Harry Moseley, CIO of Zoom. Harry, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, Ben, good morning. It's terrific to be here, and thank you. It's my privilege to join you today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. You know, maybe before we get into more business issues and get more formal, let's talk a little bit about yourself. I'd love to hear. I understand that you're an avid biker.
Yes, I am. I started road biking about 17 years ago. I did it when I was a child, and then got back into it about 17 years ago to support the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society by doing America's most beautiful bike ride around Lake Tahoe, right just 3 hours from where you are. So I think I've done it about 18 times. My wife has done it, my kids have done it, my friends have done it, and would have done it again this year had it not been for COVID-19. But I hear you're a swimmer.
I am, and I've actually swam in Lake Tahoe, not all the way around Lake Tahoe. It's not the most beautiful swim all the way around, but actually you're kind of a kindred spirit. I've been a swimmer, but I also road cycle, probably not as much as you do, it sounds like, but I have done that same world's most beautiful ride around Lake Tahoe too. A little bit less oxygen than I was used to get around it, but it's a beautiful ride.
It is a beautiful ride. It's a beautiful lake, and it's wonderful what they've done there in terms of the path and maintaining that beauty. It's just really rather spectacular. Love when you're riding up towards Spooner and looking down into the lake.
Oh yeah,
and it's just that beautiful turquoise, like a clear Caribbean sea. It's just amazing.
It's a beautiful place, to be sure. And luckily we had a drought in California a few years ago and the lake level was getting down too low. But luckily we've had more precipitation. It's a beautiful place. So Harry, let's talk about now the current times. Obviously 2020 has had a rather distinct impact on Zoom's business. Things have, I would imagine, have rapidly accelerated for the company. But in particular, you know, earlier this year with COVID-19, how would you describe the impact that the pandemic has had on your customers, and how has Zoom been able to help its customers during these unprecedented times?
Yeah, Ben, it has been an unprecedented year to date, and my expectations is as we get into the fall and the second half of 2020, things are probably going to be the same and not get dramatically better, unfortunately. So it's going to be a very long year for sure. And I think people expected things to get better in the middle of the year, but we're seeing sort of a lot of headwinds in that area. From a Zoom perspective, you know, when we go back to December of 2019, we were hosting over 10 million daily participants. And then when we got to March and April, it went to 200 and 300 million daily participants respectively, which was, you know, sort of pretty astonishing. You know, because many organizations, you know, sort of pivoted from obviously working in the office to working from home, or a phrase my wife likes to use is living at work, or another phrase is what we use at Zoom, which is working from anywhere. So people started working from anywhere. And this happened to global enterprises. I mean, I remember lots of sort of incidents that we've experienced in enterprises. We had 9/11 as an example. We've had, sort of huge storms. You in California, you had the fires, etc. In Australia, they had fires, and you had various different sort of events around the world. But this was kind of like the first event that I personally experienced that hit the sort of the planet all around the world at the same time. And so organizations sort of scattered, right, if you will. And that was, sort of global enterprises, government agencies, educational institutions. And we, we saw what was happening, particularly in the education sector. And as we know, education feeds the whole sort of work, the supply chain for employment, if you will. And so we took our platform and gave it away to schools for free. And so, we are hosting over 100,000 schools in 25 countries on the platform, which was, so it's all a very humbling experience because you're keeping the economy going, you're keeping the countries operating, and you are also educating people on a global scale.
Yeah, and I think that last point, so I have to personally thank Zoom for that. My son is a sophomore in high school, and he's on the Zoom platform right now. And it's been, a change to be sure, but a rather robust platform for him, not only to meet as a class, but then he meets in smaller cohorts. And it's been exciting to see the innovation that's been brought to bear by the teaching community, right? And rather quick form. And it was such a quick pivot, I think, for different industries like education and others to move to this kind of platform and medium real time, in this case, to deliver synchronous learning.
I think that's a great point, Ben, which is the pivot. Like, when you look at companies, how quickly they pivoted during this time frame, the decisions that we would normally take weeks or months to do, we did in like hours or days.
Yeah.
One of our clients was evaluating the platform, and they called up at sort of 3:00 on a Friday, and they said, we have 175,000 employees that are going to be working from home on Monday. Can you support us? And we said, the response was, well, what time on Monday?
Yeah.
And by the end of the following week, 175,000 people were operating globally on the Zoom platform. Now, if we had told them, go back 3 months earlier and said, we can migrate 175,000 people globally in a week to run on the Zoom platform, they would have said, you must be joking. We can't, it's like, so in times of crisis, it's absolutely astonishing at how fast we can make decisions and how fast we can execute. So it's kind of, it's like it goes to that phrase, the impossible we can do it once, miracles take a little longer, that type of thing. So it's pretty cool. We have lots of stories like that.
Yeah, I'd love for you to share more. So as a CIO, right, it's part of your job is really to plan for how do you scale, right? And you're a fast growing business like Zoom, right? Pre-COVID, and then everything went into warp speed, right? I'd love for you to share more about, how you think about scale, how you think about planning for security as well. And then all of a sudden everything goes into warp speed or overdrive. Yeah. So how did that impact you and your organization in terms of some of the very real, immediate in front of your face transformations that you had to make as an IT organization?
To say we had planned for COVID-19 would not be an accurate statement. So that's for sure. So it was a lot of people working, sort of very long hours, 7 days a week, etc. We have great partners in the industry who were there to support us. So, if we wanted to expand a network, network expansions can take, sort of 90 days to provision, and they were provisioning us in like days as opposed to, like 72 hours as opposed to sort of 90 days. So great partnerships. And that's one of the things that we say at Zoom all the time is that we don't think about our clients as clients. We think of our clients as partners. We're here to service them and support them. And if they're successful, by default, we will be successful. But I think sort of, when you look at that demand on the platform, I think it's great testimony to the architecture that Eric Yuan, our CEO and founder, designed, and how it sort of really, has stood up to the test that we've gone through in the last 6 months. When we gone from 10 million to 300 million, and our annualized meeting minutes went from 100 billion in January to 2 trillion in April, and we maintained service levels in the 4.9s. We maintained customer satisfaction in the 90 plus. We maintained our net promoter score of 70 plus. When you maintain all those sorts of metrics, and you had that sort of logarithmic, if you will, sort of growth, because sort of it wasn't. I don't know the other way to explain the growth that we went through.
Yeah.
I think it really speaks to the testimony of the architecture, which is a distributed architecture. We don't. Our 17 data centers around the world are responsible for sending messages, routing the network, routing the messages from one point to another point. We don't actually decrypt anything inside the data centers. We don't process them in any way. We just route them to their destiny. And that's where all of the workload is actually conducted at the endpoint. And we can also leverage other data centers. So if the East Coast data center gets oversubscribed, we can borrow from our central data center or borrow capacity from the West Coast data center. And then sort of because as the sun travels west, the data centers start to idle in the east. And so we're able to leverage that. We also leverage Amazon and Oracle clouds, and we've moved a lot of our free workloads to those environments. So it's been sort of a really good show of how Zoom can support this platform.
Yeah, that's where how you architect and how you manage different cloud environments in your own data center environments becomes really key. It was, as you were speaking, I was thinking about, I live in California, and we're dealing with an antiquated power grid, right? And I'm wishing that there was modernization of our power grid. So, as you have to load balance between different sites, depending on demand, which we're very much dealing with, we'd be able to do so versus we're doing with rolling blackouts, which is a big no-no, obviously, for your business.
That's a real problem. But I think, another point, Ben, is, sort of when we look more generally at sort of how companies have managed through the first 6 months of this calendar year, many CIOs that I have spoken to have said, Harry, can you imagine what it would have been like without the cloud? And I think that's kind of like an interesting data point. How would we have survived without the cloud? Many have said, how would we survive without Zoom? But sort of taking it up a level from that, how would we have survived without the cloud? Without the cloud services, etc. I think that would have been be a very interesting sort of study to do. What would the world have done without the cloud?
Yeah, it's not clear to me organizations would be able to move as quickly, right? And then there's also cost containment question, right? It's kind of which workload to which cloud, right? And make sure you do so economically as well as with.
Yeah, there's a balance, absolutely. But it's like sometimes it's like, yes, economics are really important, but operations are equally important. And if your choice is operate at a lower margin versus not operating at all, what would you take? I'll take operating at a lower margin in a heartbeat than not operating at all.
Customer first, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you brought up Eric earlier, and it made me think. I spent a decade at Cisco, and I know Eric had spent time at Cisco with the WebEx business, and it made me think about lessons learned in the past, right? History can be a great informant for how you lead in current times. And just as I know, Eric learned a lot when the whole collaboration space was still in its early innings, right? And you think now it's really in Main Street, as Jeffrey Moore would call it. Zoom's become a verb, synonymous with work, right? Which is a marketer's dream, by the way. So that's, quite a testament to the change. I'm wondering, so Eric, on his past experiences, and
sorry about that. That was my son playing with the Sonos.
which makes this very natural. You can't go for too long without something like that, right? I'm waiting for my new puppy to jump on me while we're doing this session
Oh,
here.
you got a coronavirus puppy too?
Yeah, that's quite the rage right now,
I
right?
know
So
we did too. Golden Doodle.
we have a new red standard poodle, right? 12 weeks old right now, and it's taken us straight back to when we had babies, right? Because they don't always sleep through the night, stuff like that.
I'll send you the cheat sheet after.
Deal. Um, so
So
back to
you were saying, yep.
yeah, I was saying. So how about yourself, right? What lessons in your career history have informed you? Some of your biggest lessons that you've learned. Sometimes it's scar tissue. Sometimes it's something that's more positive. But how have you taken some of your big lessons from the past into your current role in Zoom, particularly during 2020?
Yeah, there's two things. One that I learned probably later in my career than I would have liked, which is never panic. So, sometimes some things happen all the time, and it's if you go into panic mode, then the brain becomes all frazzled, and so it's very important. Take a deep breath and don't panic. I think that's sort of like number one. Erica's, he's created a great culture at Zoom. We have a very flat organization, a very open organization, a very transparent organization. And, everything at Zoom is done with the following model, which is, and it's very obvious when I tell it to you, but it's not obvious to everybody in a natural way. So what is the problem? Can you define accurately exactly what the problem is? And if you can, that's good. Then the next thing is, can you define accurately what is the root cause? Because once you can define the root cause to the problem, then you can come up with the solution. Many times, and I've seen this in my past, and I'm sure you've seen this too, which is people talk about the problem and they immediately jump to the solution. So without understanding what is the actual root cause, because if you don't sort of identify that root cause, then you could be putting a solution in place that isn't going to last and resolve it for, sort of remediate the problem on a permanent basis. So those are two very strong lessons. So yeah.
Yeah, those are great. And I think a good proper reminder, right? It's like finding the engineer within all of us, right? To diagnose, or even the medical doctor, right? Diagnose down the root cause, right? Before you start solutioning, because solutioning can come with a lot of varying opinion in my experience, right? Versus going through that kind of rigor. So I really love that advice. I'd love for you to share with us more about the evolution of IT organizations and individual professionals. You described a little bit earlier, you thought, what would it be like to not have cloud and cloud platforms to do things? And so something that I'm increasing when I meet with CIOs often they talk about the evolution of the skill set that's required to be a cloud engineer, manage hybrid cloud environments, right? Multi-cloud, definitely what you described a little bit earlier, brings that into bear. It's defying a lot of conventional wisdoms in terms of skill set and background and how IT operates. So I'd love to hear from your perspective how you've evolved your organization and how do your professionals really position themselves for what's to come, right? Because it happened rather quickly in this case.
Yeah. Several thoughts there, Ben. So first off, is I've been saying for several years now, back in my role at KPMG, I used to say this a lot, which is every company is a technology company, irrespective of what they actually do. They either run on technology or they build technology. But without the technology, every company grinds to a halt. If you look at some of the great brands that are out there today who are, being successful in today's market, they're all running on technology. Without the technology, everything sort of grinds to a halt. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of bankruptcies. I think bankruptcies are up like 50% for the first half of this year. And it's mainly been around sort of industries that haven't sort of dealt with the technology and challenge that they've had. I think technology, I long maintain that technology is sort of needs to be at the boardroom table. Technology is as critical as is human capital, as is financial, as is product development. Technology needs to be right there at the boardroom table. So that's one. On the others, and then adjacent to that is that the role of technologists have changed dramatically too. My career goes back 40 years, and back in those days, it's the technology organization was responsible for everything, all application development, all analysis, all reporting, obviously all of the infrastructure, etc. Today, I believe that the technology organization is much more pivoting to enable professionals to work, because the technology literacy of professionals has also changed rather dramatically. Everybody is a technologist today. Everybody has like 2 or 3 digital devices that they're pretty adept at using. And when you look at the young adults that are graduating our great universities today, not only have they got, sort of great skills, academic skills in whatever their chosen field is, but they also have, sort of great technical skills, because they're being they're learning how to use data visualization tools. They're learning how to use data analytical tools. They're learning how to configure and how to leverage great, sort of massive data sets using cloud computing. And so when they come into the great organizations, they're expecting the technology organization not to, quote, do the analysis for them, but to provide the tools and the platforms that enable them to get their job done. There's a great paper done by the Harvard Business Review several years back, I think about 3 years back now, and it talks about employee engagement versus employee experience. And employee engagement is all about how well they're engaging with the company from a sort of personal commitment, a loyalty, etc., versus employee experience, which is how easy is it for them to get their job done? How satisfying is it for them to get the job done? Do they have the right tools to get their job done? And what the study found back then was that companies that invested in providing a great employee experience had 4 times the revenue and twice the operating income. So I think that speaks to a lot of what's going on in the world today.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. As you were talking, it was triggering for me. I read, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal recently, maybe about a month ago, and there was kind of this provocative point that, hey, this work from home or distributed workforce thing, maybe there's going to be fatigue in that, right? And things, how long can this distributed workforce and the employee experiences that you're just talking about, how long can that carry through? So that article was questioning it, but then I just read last night about some massive shifts in real estate trends, where you're seeing a lot of, candidly, almost exodus from major city areas moving into suburban and maybe lower costs of living zones. So, it's an oft-used term. I sometimes cringe to say, but new normal, right?
Yeah,
and
I call it the next normal.
yeah, thank you. The M squared. So talk to me about what you see as the next normal for your business and your organization as you move forward, because there's some debate over, how much is what we're doing today going to be the next normal. I personally think it is going to be profoundly different moving forward, even as pandemic subsides, and it will, right? But curious to hear your insights on that.
Yeah. So, based upon talking to a lot of executives over the last several months, I've arrived at a set of conclusions. So, and those conclusions are as follows. One is that the myths of the past have been, are gone. So, the myths of the past about working from home, as being, people can't work from home effectively. People can't work from home in a productive fashion. That is no longer true. We have proven that in steroids, that people can actually work from home extraordinarily well. In fact, in many cases, even better. Now, it's true, it's not for everybody. Some people really need that sort of social environment in the office to be able to connect with colleagues, etc. Culture is being challenged by people working from home. It's kind of like I get on a Zoom call with my colleagues and there's like 3 new faces. I've never met them. So how do you meet new hires as they sort of join the company? So the culture is being challenged. And then not everybody has, sort of the accommodation in their home for people to work.
Yep.
So there are challenges in that regard. And, if you look on a geographical nature, as you go around the world, different countries have different challenges as well.
Yeah, my brother's lived in Japan for the past 30 years. And if you want to talk about a different business culture when it comes to how decisions are made, human to human, right, in an office or after the office environment versus virtually or at home, there's quite a challenge of conventional culture or wisdom.
Yeah. And in addition to all of that, then you've got employers who realize that, we can be agnostic about hiring. We don't need to hire in San Francisco or in New York City. We can hire people from Italy, and we don't need to relocate them because they can work virtually. It's all about sort of making sure they can work in the right time zone with their colleagues in other parts of the world. So those two have gone. And then, sort of going back to the corporate offices, talking to the CIO for a firm based here in New York City, 50-story building. They're trying to figure out how do they get everybody onto the floors when you only have 3 or 4 people in the elevator at a time. And then what are the lines going to be like in the lobby to get into the elevator to get onto the floor? And then the floor environment with the one-way corridors and no more than 5 people in the conference room. And if you need to have more than that, they're going to have to join by video. And then you've got the other challenge, Ben, of companies are saying we're going to have 1/3 the workforce back in the office, or maybe 1/2, and everybody else working from somewhere else. How's that hybrid collaboration going to work in this mixed environment? So I think we're going to see a lot of change, but I also believe that the human race is extraordinarily resilient. And we are extraordinarily inventive these days. And I think we're going to see some great innovations coming about that are going to enable us to work in this distributed model very nicely. So I'm encouraged by the what's going on in our industry. And I think that, again, I've said this for years, it's like the ability to get things done from a technology perspective today versus as little as 12 months ago, 24 months ago, we can move dramatically faster than ever before, and the creativity is astonishing. So I think this next normal is going to be interesting. There'll be a lot of experiments that won't work, and we'll figure that out real fast, throw it away, and come up with the next one. I do think, though, that sort of the lessons that we've learned are going to be carrying through for the next 6 or 12 months, and when we have a vaccine and things of that nature, I think many of the experiences that we've had over the last 6 months will be here for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, well said, Harry. And thank you for that perspective. And I like how you framed it as, we're humans, but we need to work together and learn together in very hybrid fashion. And I think there are going to be new ways that we do so. I see it with my son's school, right? And how do you collaborate and learn and have human connectivity with also how do you adjust the way things are today,
Yeah.
right? And it could be not only for health or safety reasons, but even for more business, top or bottom line reasons as you move forward. So it's going to be an interesting, I think, next normal, as you put it, I think very well.
Yeah. And also, you get the work-life balance. If you think about the young family with children at home, or the parent, or the sort of taking care of elderly people at home, not having to, having the ability to be able to work from home, maybe not 5 days a week, but maybe 3 days a week. That gives you a certain degree of freedom, which takes a lot of stress off people's shoulders. And so I think we're, as we sort of go through these next several months, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, very good. Well, Harry, I think you and I may want to consider doing an Ironman triathlon, but not the whole thing. I'll do the swim. I got to do 2.5 in the ocean, but it's in Hawaii, so the water will be nice. You do the bike. You've ridden around Tahoe, so you can do 120, right? In beautiful Hawaii. Hopefully no wind, right?
I'd be happy to do that. It's like, my philosophy on running, biking, and swimming is the following: is with with biking, you know, it's hard to get up the hill, but once you get up to the top, it's easy to go down the other side, which I love. You know, with running, you know, when you stop, and I don't like the pounding on my spine, but when you stop, you don't go very far. Also with biking, you can go a hell of a distance. It's like my wife and I will do 60, 70 miles when we ride. With running, you know, you don't go a long way. And with swimming, if you stop swimming, you can drown. And I think that's unhealthy. So that's why.
There's an existential threat to the whole swim thing. I'll take on that. You do the bike, and we just have to recruit a marathoner, right? Because God knows I would never run a marathon after biking that far. So anyone out there watching, if you're an interested party, you want to take on a marathon, we can put together a killer relay. Harry, thank you so much for your advice, your insight, great conversation on Cloud Counsel today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Ben, again, privileged to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Very good. So everyone, today's discussion advice will be shortly available at nutanix.com/CXO, where you can also view previous Cloud Counsel episodes. Thank you very much, and wherever you are, have a great day.